something of the 50% preference for the community that we have, but right now our policy is of the total housing that is going to be financed, 50% will be set aside for the community.
Right, so there's a rezoning project
Right.
going through our pick a neighborhood, Ridgewood, let's just
We
say.
have one there.
Okay,
We did.
so is there an absolute that the city is looking for? So this place is absolutely going to be 80-20. This place is absolutely going to be 40%, 60%, 100%.
It's going to be very neighborhood
Is that all
specific.
negotiable?
I think it's, first of all, we do want to address the unit types to be much more representative of the neighborhood profile. So if in a community district we have much more, if it's somewhere where we think that there's a need for 60%, we would then exercise those programs.
So it's all negotiable, is what you're saying. It's not an absolute, like we have this citywide plan and these neighborhoods are going to be looking for 60 to 80%. In this affordable housing, we're going to be looking for 100% to 120%. I mean,
It's totally trying to represent the neighborhood profile and the neighborhood need. So it's trying to represent the need of the community and the
so does
and
that
the
mean for
provider.
every project we're going to be negotiating the percentage?
I think it has to be. I am hesitant to say that partly because it has to financially work, and so but the good thing is that the term sheets that we have gives a range of affordability. So we have programs like Mix and Match, which has which targets as not only low income but moderate income and middle income. So there is flexibility for us to move the band around to target more moderate income or more middle income depending upon where that project is built. But can we, if a project is not at all, and also many cases, if a developer is going to propose,
Probably not use that if you don't want it.
that's fine.
This
I
is
think
fine.
you, yeah, I was practicing this morning for this.
You can just shut that off. You might want to remember that our next capital project allocation.
We'll put it.
So, and also a developer is not going to propose an AMI that is not going to be marketable in a neighborhood.
That's the problem.
And so they, if the market is not there to fetch a certain amount of AMI, it's not, project is not financially feasible. So there has to be something that is close to the market and below the market range. So typically that's the range we work towards, and that gives you an idea of how we are targeting the.
Speaking with developers by us, they started out originally at 20%, which is now they're starting out at 30% negotiating. And the one developer that we did give a zoning change to was forced into 40%. And now we may not be able to build it because the numbers don't work.
That was the Ridgewood project, the 85 in?
Yeah, I think these are kind of fine-tuned, and I am not the financial expert, but if you want more information on it, we can always
Thank you.
have some.
We're getting briefed tomorrow. My office is, I'm getting briefed tomorrow on the citywide and the borough-wide implications.
Hi, may we get a text of this sent to our community boards?
Sure.
I'd appreciate that.
You mean
This presentation?
Your presentation.
Yeah, can we get a copy? If you send it to us, we'll send it out to
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are we good? Everybody? We thank Shaka very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one replacement tonight, George Samatiadis is going to be representing Board 1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. And we do want to acknowledge Councilman. Yep.
I just wanted, on Vinnie Donato's behalf, he asked me to tell everybody how much he enjoyed working with the Borough Board, the Borough President's Office, and he thanks everyone for their support through the years to Community Board 1 with our different projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martha? ever President Malta.
Yes. Ward 8.
See, you can't.
Sitting in for Alvin Shaviak is Martin Taylor.
No, I vote no.
There's
All
always
right.
one in the crowd.
We'll add that to the previous vote. And now we have EDC. Hi.
Hello.
Nice seeing you.
It's good to see a bunch of old friends, some friends that I've seen a lot.
So EDC has put out a request for proposal to operate a citywide ferry system which will knit together existing East River routes with new landings and services across the city of New York. 3 routes of expanded service will launch in 2017 with 2 more launching in 2018. The phased approach is designed to support otherwise isolated neighborhoods like the Rockaways by drastically expanding a resilient and equitable transportation system. We have here today Light and Sleeper, who we know through many iterations, Justine Johnson, James Wong, all from EDC. I would like to acknowledge the fact, by the way, that Councilman Drum has joined us here tonight as well. We love having representation from the council. Thank you. And EDC.
Great, so we are, as we load this up, Justine, feel free to pass these around. My name is Lyden Sleeper. I'm the Senior Vice President of Government and Community Relations. Justine, who is also on the agenda, is actually attending a public scoping meeting actually around the corner in room 200, so we are all over the building today. And James, who runs a good bunch of our ferries operations, is going to help walk us through the work that we've done so far and some of the key information about the routes and ferries.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for having us. We're really excited. There's a lot of great activity going on in the citywide ferry system right here in Queens. And so we're really looking forward to everything that we've got coming up. So I'll go through this presentation. We'll open it up for a couple of questions. And as I said, as Lyden had mentioned, we do have the scoping hearing as well, so we'll be shifting right down there following this so that we can make sure we're also hearing things that are going on there as well. So just to mention a brief introduction to ferries and kind of how we got here, for those who are a little curious about why EDC itself is at the table. So EDC has been at the forefront for ferries over the last several years, close to a decade. Starting in 2008, we ran the first Rockaway pilot on behalf of the city, a short-term program. A citywide ferry study in 2010, 2011 was one of our first attempts to take a comprehensive look throughout the city at what kind of routes would be available to us. At that time, we were also launching the East River Ferry as a pilot service. So at the time, we were looking at it and we launched it for a 3-year pilot. And so through that, we learned a lot. We learned about the density of neighborhoods that are useful to support ferry service. We learned about the kind of walking trips that are best accommodated on ferry trips, things like that. And so that was actually signed into a long-term contract in 2014. So a pilot service, testing out, seeing, and actually signing into long-term services there. Also, of course, after Sandy, we ran a Rockaway service, which was really on behalf of federal money that was brought to the region for the emergency. So FEMA money that was used to fund the Rockaway service. It was done quickly. We learned a lot from that operation as well. And then we also were underway with the 2013 citywide ferry study. The 2013 study was very important to us because that laid the foundation for what would ultimately become the mayor's plan for citywide ferry service. So in February of this year, the mayor announced the citywide ferry plan, and growing from there, you'll notice there's a lot of correlations between what's in the 2013 citywide ferry study and what we have shown here. So I want to talk a little bit about project implementation. First of all, setting forth many of our goals that are very core to us, and we want to make sure that everyone we are talking to knows what we're thinking about. The first and most important thing is that we are creating a safe system. Safe doesn't just mean that the vessels and the boats themselves are safe, although that is a very key and important part to us. We want to make sure that the contractors we work with, those who are building things on the waterfront, who are working with a waterfront that we care very much about, are doing so in a safe system, in a safe manner, and also that as we go forward and start operations, that we're sharing our waterways. New York's waterways are shared by everyone, whether it's freight, recreational users, ferry users. There's a lot of people who are going to be using it, and we want to make sure that we operate in a safe manner. That said, we are moving very quickly. We have planning to launch 3 different routes in 2017. That's going to be the Rockaway route, Astoria, and South Brooklyn. And we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of those routes in a moment. And we would launch the remaining routes in 2018, those connecting the Lower East Side and Sound. We do, obviously we have the success of the East River Ferry. We want to make sure we incorporate that and the lessons learned into what we do as we proceed. So we will ensure the continuity of the East River Ferry. And we want to make sure that whether we have one or multiple operators that we're working with, and we do have an open procurement at this juncture, that we create a unified system. It's not going to be one company and then another company who are running different routes. You will be boarding the city's ferry system, and that's very important to us. So if you want, take a look at the handout. I hope folks have them. We did pass around. If you need more, we've got some floating around. This is the citywide ferry system, which is comprised of 6 different routes, 5 routes plus the existing East River Ferry. As I had mentioned, the 3 starting in the short run, or in 2017, would be the Astoria route, which connects Astoria, Roosevelt Island, Long Island City to Midtown and Lower Manhattan, South Brooklyn, and then the Rockaway route, which restores the previous service to Beach 108th Street. The 2018 routes, the Upper East Side to Soundview in the Bronx, as well as the Lower East Side, and ongoing connections to Long Island City. So to talk a little bit about the landings themselves, this was really right out of what we have learned from our existing operational experience. What people want, we do surveys, we understand the ridership, we understand what helps make sure that people are willing to take ferries even in the winter when things are cold, when there's a breeze, when there's an ice cold rush coming off of the water. It's important to us that we're very sensitive to how we're working with the various upland users. So if you look on the left-hand side, there's what we call the existing esplanade. So typically we're working with a hardened landing where it's usually in a park or some other facility where there's a hardened esplanade there. Our intention is to have as little impact as possible on the upland areas because we know that where there are parks and other areas, we want to be very sensitive to the existing users and make sure that we're not having an adverse impact on them. So we are planning to accommodate everything on the barge. As you go from the esplanade, you would go through a Coast Guard approved security gate onto a gangway or a walkway that extends out onto the water over towards the barge. The barge itself is where most everything for the landing is going to be contained. The barge is 35 by 90 feet, so it's a sizable, it's a floating steel box on which everything else is put in place. And we are planning to put all of our amenities on there. That will include ticketing, waiting areas, passenger information. It will also include, and this is sort of a change of pace from what we have on most of our other landings, shelters and windscreens, something that we know really will help make sure that ridership for regular commuters and those who need to use this service on a regular basis are able to do so in the winter. So to talk about some of the different routes and those that are serving the Queens communities, I want to talk about first the Astoria route. You'll see there are some of the travel times that are listed here. Travel time from Astoria down to Lower Manhattan would be done in around 40 minutes. There are stops in between that would go, as I said, to Roosevelt Island, Long Island City, East 34th, and Wall Street. One of the things that we've learned that's important to highlight here is that ferries really fill in the gaps for waterfront communities. As New York developed and as bridges were built and tunnels and subways, everything was brought further inland. So that last half mile between the shore and where transportation connections pick up was often neglected for many years. And so now what we're doing is trying to offer an amenity, a transportation amenity, for those people who are living and working near or on the waterfront. Living, working, also using the many, many parks that our city has along the waterfront, which have seen a real resurgence over the last couple of years. Talking a little bit about some of the specific sites, looking at Hallux Cove, this is one of the locations where we actually had more than one option on the table early on. But as we did the study, we learned about some of the navigational challenges that come with having to traverse through, if anyone's a boater, having to traverse near and through Hell Gate. Knowing that that was a real challenge and that there's existing residential density at Astoria houses, this is one where we actually worked with the community in order to understand why Hallux Cove was actually going to be a safer and ultimately more useful location for the ferry landing. I will flag that this is an area where we do have recreational boaters that do like using the water here. It is calm water. And one of the great opportunities for us to work with communities was in fact to go and work with the Long Island City Boathouse, which does have operations in and around the area and works with other peer groups to help give us advice on how to better design the landing. So this landing will actually be designed such that the wakes for these vessels are thrown westward, so that the landing is actually oriented so ferries are coming in to the east as opposed to pointing north, where the wake would have more of an impact on kayakers. This was just something I was highlighting earlier. One of the other things was moving things as far away as possible from where the kayakers were. So some of the technical studies that we've done were to make sure that there is sufficient depth. So we made sure that where we were looking there was adequate water depth, and that we weren't too close to where the existing uses were. You'll see in this drawing, this is what I was just mentioning, if you notice, what you're looking at is an overhead view of the Hallux Cove, of a landing in Hallux Cove. We worked with Astoria houses also to ensure that we understood what the usage of this esplanade was like, so that we're trying to avoid having adverse impacts. These two ferry vessels are shown pointing eastward, again showing that the wake would actually be thrown to the left, providing for areas over here where kayakers are often seen enjoying the cove. I got a little ahead of myself. These are some of the opportunities we've seen where we do have events currently with the recreational boating community. We were just very sensitive because we wanted to make sure that we're trying to be very sensitive to the existing users of our waterways. And that was, as I had mentioned, a great opportunity.